The chapel smelled of roses and whispers. Emily Carter's hands trembled as she clutched her bouquet, the white satin of her dress clinging to her skin like it had something to prove. Every pair of eyes in the room was on her, not with admiration, but with pity and judgment. She's marrying him for the money. Poor girl, look at him, he'll never be the same again. What kind of love story starts in a wheelchair? The murmurs rippled through the crowd like poison, but Emily kept her chin high. She couldn't let them see her break. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. At the front, Logan Carter sat waiting in his custom-made wheelchair. He was devastatingly handsome in his black suit, the kind of man who commanded attention even without standing. But there was no warmth in his gaze. His storm-gray eyes locked on hers, unreadable, cold, like he was daring her to back out. His jaw tightened, and for a moment Emily wondered if he hated her already. Or maybe he hated himself, hated this entire charade. The priest cleared his throat, but the room stayed heavy, suffocating with unspoken questions. Do you, Emily Rose Carter, take Logan James Carter to be your lawfully wedded husband? Her breath hitched. Every fiber of her body screamed to run, to throw the bouquet to the ground and sprint for the doors. But the image of her mother's hospital bills, the threats from the debt collectors, and the tears in her little brother's eyes pinned her in place. Yes, she whispered, though it came out weaker than she intended. A rustle of disapproval passed through the pews. Then the priest's gaze shifted. And do you, Logan James Carter, take Emily Rose Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife? Logan's lips curved, not in a smile, but in a smirk, the kind of expression that dared the world to underestimate him. I do, he said firmly, his voice cutting like steel. Gasps echoed, because everyone knew the rumors. Logan hadn't wanted a wife. He hadn't wanted anyone since the accident. But here he was, cold and arrogant, binding a stranger to him in front of God, family, and enemies alike. When the kiss came, it wasn't a kiss. Not really. Logan leaned forward just enough for his lips to brush against hers. Fleeting, detached, a performance for the audience rather than a promise for her. Emily's heart sank, but she forced herself to stand tall, because this wasn't love. This was a contract, and contracts came with consequences. The crowd erupted in half-hearted applause, more scandalized than supportive. Emily could almost hear their thoughts. She sold herself. He trapped her. This marriage won't last a year. But as Logan wheeled forward, his hand brushing hers with a cold precision, he leaned close enough for only her to hear. Welcome to hell, Mrs. Carter. Her stomach dropped, and just like that, the story of their contract marriage began. Written in ink, whispers, and broken hearts. If you're hooked already, don't just watch quietly. Subscribe and like this story now before the secrets unravel. Welcome to MG's Love Stories, where passion burns, hearts break, and you can't stop watching. Don't just listen. Feel it. Like this story? Share, subscribe, and let's dive in. 3 weeks before the wedding, Emily never imagined she'd be wearing a white dress for a man she barely knew. The debt notices had piled like tombstones on her kitchen counter. Each red-lettered envelope was heavier than the last. Reminders that her world was crumbling faster than she could hold it together. Her mother's cancer treatments had drained everything. The bakery she worked at barely kept the lights on. And her little brother, Tyler, looked at her with wide, terrified eyes each night, asking questions she couldn't answer. She had no way out. Until Logan Carter's lawyer came knocking. The meeting wasn't in a grand office. It was in the Carter estate's study, a room as cold and sharp as the man who owned it. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the sprawling grounds, but the curtains were half-drawn, letting only slivers of light in. Logan sat behind his desk, a dark figure framed by leather and glass. His wheelchair was sleek, almost intimidating. Like everything about him had been designed to remind people that despite what he'd lost, he was still untouchable. Emily stood before him, clutching her bag like a shield. So, Logan began, his voice low, threaded with arrogance. You're the girl desperate enough to marry a man she doesn't love. Emily flinched, heat rushing to her face. I didn't. Save it. He leaned back slightly, gray eyes sharp as knives. I know your situation, Emily Rose Carter. Hospital bills, debts, you're drowning. And lucky for you, I need a wife. The words hung in the air, too casual for what he was proposing. Emily swallowed hard. Why? Logan's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. Because people talk. Investors, board members. They look at me and see weakness. A man who can't walk. A man unfit to run an empire. A wife changes that. It makes me respectable again. Respectable. Not loved. Not whole. Just packaged properly for the vultures. Emily's fingers curled tighter around her bag. And in return? You'll have security, he said smoothly. Money. Protection. Your debts will disappear. Your family will be taken care of. All you have to do is sign. From the drawer, he slid a crisp folder across the desk. Contract. Emily hesitated before opening it, her heart thundering as her eyes scanned the terms. 1. No expectation of intimacy. 2. No interference in personal affairs. 3. No public scandals. 4. The marriage will last exactly 12 months, after which divorce papers will be filed. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't a marriage. It was a business deal dressed in vows. Her voice shook when she asked, "And if I refuse?" Logan's eyes darkened, his tone cutting. Then you go back to watching your mother die slowly in a hospital bed while collectors bang on your door. Tell me, Emily, how long can you survive that? Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them back. He was cruel, maybe even heartless, but he was right. She didn't have a choice. Still, something burned in her chest. A small, stubborn piece of her that refused to let him see her as weak. Fine, she said, forcing her chin up. But don't think for a second this makes you my savior. For the first time, Logan's smirk softened into something more dangerous. Amusement. Good. I don't need another woman looking at me like I'm broken. You'll sign, we'll smile for the cameras, and when the year is up, we'll go our separate ways. No feelings. No mess. His words were a wall, but Emily felt the cracks anyway. The bitterness in his voice wasn't just arrogance. It was pain, raw, buried, and masked with steel. She signed her name on the dotted line. Her hand trembled, but she didn't stop until the ink was dry. Logan leaned forward, his eyes locking on hers. Congratulations, Mrs. Carter. You've just sold a year of your life. Emily's chest tightened. A year, she told herself. Just 1 year. I can survive this. But as she walked out of the study that night, her skin prickling under the weight of his gaze, she knew survival wouldn't be that simple. Because contracts may end, but consequences don't. What about you? Would you ever marry for money if love wasn't promised? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know. The Carter mansion was breathtaking, but it didn't feel like home. Emily walked through the grand marble halls on her first night as Mrs. Carter, her heels clicking like an intruder's footsteps. Portraits of Logan's ancestors glared down from golden frames, their painted eyes reminding her of the whispers at the wedding. She's just here for his money. Poor Logan. Look at what he's been reduced to. The truth weighed heavy on her shoulders. She wasn't here for love. She was here because she had no choice. Dinner that night was silent. Logan sat at the head of the long mahogany table, a glass of red wine untouched by his hand. His wheelchair was angled slightly away from her, like even proximity was too much. Emily forced herself to eat, the silverware trembling faintly against the porcelain plates. She could feel his gaze on her, sharp and assessing. Finally, he broke the silence. If you're going to fidget all evening, at least try not to rattle the dishes. It's irritating. Her fork froze midair. She bit back the retort that burned on her tongue. Instead, she placed it down carefully, her voice steady. Noted. A flicker of amusement flashed across his face, but it was gone in an instant. Good. We should at least look like we can tolerate each other. Appearances are everything. Appearances. That was all this marriage was to him. A performance. Emily exhaled slowly. And when the doors close, Do I stay silent then too? Logan's gaze lifted, his storm-gray eyes locking with hers. For a moment, the arrogance faltered. Something raw and unguarded flickered across his face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You can do whatever you like, Mrs. Carter," he said coldly, rolling back from the table. "Just remember, it changes nothing." He wheeled away, leaving her in silence once again. The days that followed blurred into a routine of distance. Emily woke up alone, though they shared the same sprawling bedroom. Logan never stayed through the night, retreating instead to his private study. Their interactions were clipped, polite, but laced with tension sharp enough to draw blood. And yet, in the cracks of his armor, she saw glimpses that made her chest tighten. The way his jaw clenched when he struggled to reach a shelf he could no longer stand for. The subtle flinch when someone's pitying gaze lingered too long. The rare nights she heard piano music drifting from his study. Haunting, beautiful, and lonely. Logan Carter was cold, arrogant, wounded, but he wasn't hollow, and that terrified her more than the contract itself. Their first public appearance as husband and wife came 2 weeks later. A charity gala at the Grand Harbor Hotel. The paparazzi swarmed like vultures outside, their cameras flashing as Emily stepped out of the sleek black car in her sapphire gown. Logan followed, his wheelchair moving with effortless control, his expression as hard as stone. "Smile," he muttered under his breath as they approached the red carpet. "If you look miserable, they'll eat us alive." Emily forced her lips into a soft curve, looping her arm through his. The flashes were blinding, the questions shouted from every direction. "Emily, what's it like being married to Logan Carter? Logan, is this real love or just for show? Mrs. Carter, are you after his money?" Her heart thudded painfully. She wanted to scream, to defend herself, but Logan's hand tightened over hers. He leaned toward the microphones, his tone sharp and controlled. "My wife is none of your business," he snapped, sending the reporters into a frenzy. For a moment, Emily thought she saw something protective in his eyes, but by the time they reached the ballroom, the mask was back in place. Inside, the whispers were worse than the cameras. Emily felt the eyes of the wealthy elite burn into her, scanning, judging. Her skin crawled. She excused herself to the balcony, desperate for air. The city stretched out before her, glittering with lights, mocking her smallness. "You're terrible at pretending," Logan's voice came from behind. She turned, startled to see him there. "I wasn't pretending. I just needed space." He wheeled closer, his expression unreadable. "You care too much about what they think. That's weakness, Emily. People like them feed on it." Her lips parted, anger bubbling up. "Easy for you to say. You don't have a room full of strangers whispering that you're nothing but a gold digger." For once, he didn't fire back immediately. He studied her, his eyes lingering on the flush in her cheeks, the fire in her tone. Then his lips curved into that arrogant smirk. Finally, some backbone. Her chest rose and fell, heat flooding her veins. She hated that smirk. She hated the way he looked at her, like he could see right through her defenses. But what she hated most was how her heart stuttered anyway. That night, when they returned home, Emily lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Logan was in his study again, the faint sound of piano notes drifting through the walls. She closed her eyes, torn between resentment and curiosity, because for the first time, she wondered if behind all the arrogance and walls, there was a man worth knowing. And if she let herself, she wasn't sure she could stop. If you can already feel the tension between Emily and Logan, share this story with someone who loves a slow-burn romance. It's only going to get deeper from here. The house had learned their rhythms in a way Emily hadn't expected. She could tell when Logan was home by the soft scrape of his wheelchair across the hardwood and by the thin trail of piano notes that sometimes leaked from his study late at night. He never played for an audience. The music was private, a sound that belonged to the man he kept locked behind steel and sarcasm. At first, she treated Logan like an obligation. A stranger seemed to her by signatures and signatures alone. But the more she lived in those halls, the more she saw him not as a contract clause but as a storm. Cold, arrogant, wounded, and urgently alive underneath. Tonight, that storm smoldered close. She'd cooked rosemary chicken, mashed potatoes whipped until they were clouds. The small domesticity, a quiet rebellion against the mansion's chill. Emily stood at the kitchen island in her apron, stray hairs loose around her face, when Logan rolled into the dining room. He took his place at the head of the long oak table, the light catching the sharp planes of his face. The chair looked like a piece of modern art, sleek, clinical, designed to say he was still the one in control. "You don't have to keep doing this," he said finally, low and flat. She set a plate down in front of him, forcing a calm she didn't feel. Doing what? Playing house. His eyes were knives today, gray and clinical. Pretending there's anything to salvage. "We both know it's a contract, Emily." She jabbed her fork into the potato a touch too hard. "And what's wrong with wanting it to be less unbearable?" He let out a breath that might have been a laugh. "Tolerable isn't the word you want. You want more. That's where the trouble lives." Her heartbeat stuttered at the accuracy of his read. He always saw more than she wanted him to. "Maybe I do," she said before she could stop herself. For a heartbeat, he merely regarded her, like an experiment producing unexpected results. Then he wheeled closer until the chair murmured against the floor and his presence filled the space between them. Close enough that the heat from his suit reached her. Close enough that she felt ridiculous for wanting him to be any warmer. "Emily," he said, the name an accusation as much as it was a plea. "I'm not the man you think you want." "Then tell me what kind of man you are," she whispered. "The kind that ruins everything good," he said simply. There was a rawness to his voice that dropped the arrogance for a second. Something like an exposed nerve. She could have backed away. She didn't. Instead, she leaned forward a fraction, drawn, reckless. Before anything else could happen, the bell rang and the atmosphere cracked. Emily's shoulders hitched. Logan's jaw clenched. His composure slid back on like armor. At the door stood a man she'd heard about in clipped, brittle sentences. Tall, confident, and smiling with teeth that said he never had to ask for anything. Michael Carter, Logan's brother. "Michael Carter," he announced with smooth politeness that didn't mask something sharper. "I thought this was a rumor. My brother married." Emily felt him sweep the room with a look that cataloged and dismissed in the same breath. "This must be the wife," he added, and his eyes flicked over her as if she were a curiosity on display. She bristled. "Mrs. Carter, actually." Michael's smile sharpened. "Right? Well, I never pictured Logan choosing someone like you." Heat flamed in Emily's face. "Someone like me?" Logan's chair made that small pivot he used when he tightened. She'd seen it before when he was about to issue an order. "Michael," he said, the one word loaded and cold. "What are you doing here?" Michael strolled in anyway, lounging in the doorway like a man confident in his welcome. "Thought I'd see if the rumor mill finally landed on something entertaining. You've been avoiding family events, Logan. Curious why you picked marriage as your reappearance." Emily's fists clenched at his tone. She opened her mouth to return the insult, something sharp and clean, but Logan cut in before she could, voice a blade. "What do you want?" Michael's grin didn't falter. "To see who's trying to cash in on the Carter name. You never were one for subtlety, Em." The jab was pointed, cruel, as if he'd already decided her place in this house. Something in Emily snapped. "If you're looking for subtlety, try actually being a decent human being. Your brother married me for reasons none of you will understand. If you want to insult him, try not to drown in your own arrogance." Michael blinked at her boldness, and for a beat the smugness faltered into a warning stare. Logan's expression changed, more quickly than she'd expected. The mask slipped and something raw showed through. Hurt, surprised, and a flicker of admiration. "You shouldn't do that," Logan breathed, voice small. "Do what?" She stepped forward, fury warming her voice. "Defend me? Or let someone like him belittle you?" He watched her with an intensity that made her stomach tangle. "You don't have to do that for me." "I do." The word landed harder than she'd meant. For the first time since signing their names, she felt the line between contract and care wobble. Michael scoffed and left with the practiced disdain of someone who believed power guaranteed clever exits. The door shut, and the house inhaled a silence full of aftermath. Logan's gaze lingered on her. "You didn't have to say that," he muttered. But the edges were different, softer, less clipped. "Yes, I did," she said, still flushed. "Because if anyone's going to sit there and insult you, it won't be your brother. Not if I can help it." He studied her, something almost like a smile crossing his face, then vanishing. "You keep defending me like that, Emily, and I might start to believe you actually care." Her throat tightened. She let out a breath that felt fragile. "Maybe I do," she said, barely audible. For a moment he reached out, his fingers skimming hers across the table, testing a current neither of them yet named. The touch was light, searching, and the simple contact made the air in the room compress until she could hardly breathe. Then he pulled away. "Don't give me something I can't have," Logan said, and the words were full of threat and pleading, both raw and lethal. It was cruel and honest, and everything she'd been trying not to need. Her heart stuttered. "What if it's already too late?" she whispered. He didn't answer. He wheeled back into the hall, into the chill of his study where the piano waited and his music would fill the night, lonely and beautiful. Emily remained at the table, fingers still tingling where his had brushed hers, mind a whirl of boundaries eroding and unnamed wants growing. The contract still hung over them like law, but the edges were softening. Lines that were once clear as ink were blurring, and she realized with a thud that no clause would be strong enough to keep what was beginning to pull them together. Emily's days in the mansion had started to blur together. Morning breakfasts she mostly ate alone, quiet afternoons in the library or garden, and tense, loaded dinners with Logan where their words were sharp but their silences even sharper. Yet somewhere between the arguments and the silence, something unspoken began to grow. It was in the way she noticed how Logan's jaw clenched whenever he was in pain but he refused to admit it, or how his hand lingered on the glass of whiskey a little too long before setting it down, like he was fighting demons only he could see. It was in the way his gaze, though cold, though arrogant, sometimes softened for half a second when he thought she wasn't looking. Emily was learning that behind his sharp tongue and iron walls was a man who had been hurt too deeply, too unfairly. And that realization both unsettled her and pulled her in closer. The storm that night rattled against the wide glass windows of the dining hall. Emily sat across from Logan, the candlelight throwing shadows across his face. His hands rested on the arms of his wheelchair, his posture rigid, shoulders squared, as if the mere act of existing was another battle he refused to lose. "You're staring," Logan said flatly, not looking up from his plate. Emily stiffened, caught. "I wasn't." One dark brow arched. "You were. Don't flatter yourself into thinking I wouldn't notice." Her cheeks heated, but she refused to back down. "You always assume the worst of people. Maybe I was just wondering why you look like you're ready to murder your steak." That earned her something unexpected. A low, short laugh. Dry, rough around the edges, but real. Emily froze, watching him with wide eyes. "What?" Logan asked, noticing her surprise. "You laughed," she said, a little breathless. His lips twitched, but his eyes narrowed again, walls slamming back into place. "Don't get used to it." But Emily couldn't stop the small smile tugging at her lips. For the first time, Logan didn't look untouchable. He looked human. Later that evening, the storm knocked out the power. Emily fumbled through the halls with only the faint glow of her phone flashlight. "Damn it," she muttered, trying to navigate the endless corridors. A sudden sound behind her, wheels on polished wood. She turned to see Logan, moving his chair smoothly despite the dark. "Power's out," he said unnecessarily, his tone dry. "No kidding," Emily replied, hugging her arms around herself. Lightning cracked outside, lighting his face for just a heartbeat. That same face that was always unreadable, always controlled. Except now. Now he looked tired, vulnerable even. "Follow me," Logan said. "I know the house better than you do." She did. Down the hall, up a small ramp, into the study where Logan lit a fire with quick, practiced motions. Emily sank into the chair across from him, the crackling flames casting a golden glow around them. For a while, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched, heavy but not suffocating. Finally, Emily said softly, "Does it hurt?" All the time. Logan's hands froze over the armrest. His eyes, stormy and dark, lifted to hers. "Why do you care?" She swallowed, but didn't look away. "Because I see it, the way you hide it. And it must be exhausting, carrying it all alone." Something flickered in his gaze. Pain, anger, maybe even gratitude. "It doesn't matter," Logan muttered. "What's broken stays broken." Emily's chest ached at his words, not just because of what he said, but because she saw the truth behind them. He wasn't just talking about his legs. He was talking about his heart. The firelight danced between them. Emily leaned forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe not everything that's broken is beyond repair." For a moment, the air shifted, heavy, charged. Logan's eyes dropped to her lips, lingering there for half a second too long before snapping back to the fire. His jaw clenched as if fighting himself. Emily's breath caught. Did he feel it too? The pull between them? The raw, magnetic tension that kept growing every time they were in the same room? "Emily," he said roughly, his tone warning, but his voice had lost its edge. Don't go there." Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. She wasn't even sure what she would have done if he hadn't spoken. Reached for his hand? Touched his face? Closed the space between them? Instead, she leaned back, breaking the spell. But the silence that followed wasn't the same as before. Now it buzzed with everything unsaid. Hours later, Emily couldn't sleep. She wandered back into the study, only to find Logan still there, staring into the dying fire, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. "You should be in bed," she said softly. "So should you," he replied without turning. Emily hesitated, then crossed the room and sat beside him on the rug, close enough that their shoulders brushed. He stiffened at the contact, but he didn't pull away. "You know," she began, her voice tentative, "people aren't looking at you and seeing what you think they see." Finally, Logan looked at her, his eyes piercing. "And what is it you think I believe they see?" Emily held his gaze. "Weakness." The word hung in the air like a knife. Logan's face darkened, but Emily didn't flinch. "They don't see weakness, Logan," she continued. "They see a man who's been through hell and is still standing. Maybe not the same way as before, but standing nonetheless. And if you can't see that, maybe you're the one judging yourself too harshly." For a moment, Logan didn't move, didn't speak. The firelight flickered across his sharp features, highlighting the raw conflict in his eyes. Then, so quietly Emily almost didn't hear it, he whispered, "I used to be different." Her heart squeezed. "Tell me." And he did. For the first time, Logan opened up. He told her about the accident, about the betrayal that had cost him not only his mobility but the woman he thought would stand by him, about how the empire he built felt like a gilded cage now, a reminder of everything he'd lost. Emily listened, her chest aching with every word. She didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix it. She just stayed there, letting him pour out what he had buried so deeply. When he finally fell silent, Emily reached out instinctively. Her fingers brushed against his hand resting on the armrest. Logan tensed but didn't pull away. It wasn't much, barely a touch. But in that moment it was everything. The night stretched into morning. Neither of them slept. And by dawn, something had shifted. Emily realized she wasn't just surviving this contract anymore. She wasn't just biding her time in Logan's mansion until she could leave. She wanted to be there, with him. And Logan, though still guarded, had let her see a piece of himself no one else had. For the first time since their marriage began, Emily felt hope. But as the sun rose over the estate, Logan pulled his hand away and said in a low, unreadable voice, "Don't mistake this for something it's not." Emily's heart sank, but she nodded. "I know." She didn't. Not really. But she told herself she did. because deep down she was already falling. And Logan was fighting it with everything he had. Emily's hands trembled as she gripped the glass of water, her chest rising and falling faster than she wanted Logan to notice. But of course, he noticed everything. He always did. The storm that had been simmering between them for weeks had reached a breaking point, and the walls Logan had built around his heart were starting to crumble. "You've been avoiding me," he said, his voice sharp, controlled, too controlled. Logan wheeled closer, the sound of the chair slicing through the silence of the living room. His gray eyes pinned her down like she was prey, and for the first time, Emily didn't have the strength to look away. "I haven't been avoiding you," she whispered, though her tone betrayed her. "I've just been giving you space." "Space," he repeated, almost like it was a curse. "You've been living in this house for months, Emily. You sit across from me at dinner. You laugh with my sister. You help with everything. But the second it's just the two of us, you vanish." "Why?" Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to deny it, but the truth sat heavy in her chest. Because she wanted him. Because every time she looked at him, her heart betrayed her by hoping for something she wasn't sure he was capable of giving. "Because you make it impossible," she finally admitted, her voice cracking under the weight of her confession. Logan's eyes narrowed. "Impossible?" "Yes." Her voice grew stronger, fueled by the months of tension she had bottled up. "You hide behind your arrogance and your anger, but underneath it, you care. You care more than you'll ever admit. And it terrifies me, Logan. Because I'm already falling." She broke off, pressing her lips together before they could betray her further. The silence that followed was deafening. Logan's jaw clenched, his knuckles tightening on the armrest of his chair. His whole body radiated a storm barely contained. "Falling?" he repeated, softer this time, almost like the word was fragile, and he wasn't sure what to do with it. Emily's cheeks burned. "Forget I said that." "No," his voice was rough, guttural. "Don't you dare take that back." Her heart raced. He was looking at her like she was the only person in his world, and it terrified her because, what if she was? "You think I don't notice you?" he asked, his voice low now, dangerous in its vulnerability. "You think I don't hear the way you hum when you cook? Or how you leave the light on in the hallway because you know it helps me navigate at night? You think I don't see how you put yourself last every damn time just to make my life easier? Emily, you've invaded every corner of this house, of my life, and I don't know how to stop wanting you." Her breath caught. "You want me?" Logan let out a harsh laugh, though it held no humor. "Want you? That word isn't big enough." He shoved his chair back with sudden force, moving closer to her until the space between them all but disappeared. "You think this is easy for me? To need someone this much? To need you this much?" Emily's eyes stung, and she shook her head, her voice breaking. "Then why do you keep pushing me away?" His answer was immediate, raw. "Because I'm broken, Emily." His voice thundered in the room, raw and ragged. "Because every time I let myself think I deserve you, I remember the truth. I'm not the man you should be falling for. I'm not whole. And you deserve someone whole." Her heart twisted at the anguish in his voice. For the first time, she saw not the cold, arrogant millionaire, but the man beneath, wounded and terrified of being unworthy. "You don't get to decide what I deserve," Emily said firmly, stepping closer. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying the weight of her conviction. "You think your wheelchair makes you less of a man? It doesn't. Do you even realize who you are? You're stubborn, yes. Infuriating, definitely. But you're also brilliant, protective, and so damn kind when you let yourself be. Logan, I don't care about perfect. I care about you." The words broke something inside him. His hands shook as he reached for her, hesitating for a fraction of a second like he was terrified she would pull away. But Emily didn't. She closed the distance, her hand sliding into his. It was electric. The world seemed to pause, silence wrapping around them like a cocoon. "You drive me insane," Logan murmured, his forehead pressing against hers, his voice rough with restraint. "Every night I tell myself to stay away from you, And every morning I wake up wanting you more. You've ruined me, Emily." Her breath mingled with his, her lips trembling as they hovered dangerously close. "Then stop fighting it." And just like that, the dam broke. Logan's lips crashed against hers, desperate and bruising, months of tension unraveling in one explosive kiss. Emily gasped, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer even as he tugged her down into his lap. The kiss deepened, raw and consuming, the kind of kiss that left no room for doubt. It wasn't just want. It was need. Emily broke away for air, her chest heaving. "Logan!" But he silenced her with another kiss, softer this time, reverent. His hands framed her face, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can give you everything you deserve, but I swear, Emily, I'll burn the world before I let you go." Tears slid down her cheeks, but she was smiling, her heart soaring in her chest. "Then don't let me go." Their lips met again, slower now, as if they were savoring every second. For the first time, the walls between them weren't just cracking, they had fallen completely, and neither of them had any intention of rebuilding them. The silence in the mansion was heavier than any argument Emily had ever known. After the heated storm of words in Act 6, where everything had boiled over, the house now felt like a battlefield in the aftermath of war. No slammed doors, no echo of Logan's deep voice, no shuffling of her own restless footsteps, just silence. And silence was worse. Silence left her alone with her thoughts, and her thoughts could be cruel. Emily sat at the dining table, her palms pressed flat against the cool wood, staring at a bowl of untouched soup. The cook had left it for her earlier, but her appetite had gone missing the moment Logan's words replayed in her mind. His pride, his sharp tongue, the way he accused her of pitying him. It all stung. Yet underneath the sting was a softer ache. The way his eyes had glimmered with pain when he shouted. He wasn't just angry, he was wounded. And the cruelest part? She wasn't sure if she was angrier at him or at herself for caring. Upstairs, Logan stared at the ceiling of his dimly lit bedroom. His wheelchair sat in the corner, abandoned. He hadn't moved since the fight, choosing instead to brood in silence. His chest was tight, as if the words he had spat at Emily were pressing down on his lungs. Why did I say that? He thought bitterly, rubbing his temple. The truth was, he had seen something in her eyes during the fight. Something he couldn't handle. Not pity, no, worse. Concern. Affection, maybe. And affection meant possibility. And possibility meant heartbreak. He couldn't go through that again. So he lashed out. It was easier to make her hate him than to risk her loving him. The following morning, Emily decided she wouldn't cower in her own house. She dressed, tied her hair back, and left early for her part-time work at the community center library. Organizing dusty shelves and helping children with homework gave her a sense of peace, something Logan's constant brooding could never give. But when she returned home later that evening, she froze at the sight in front of the mansion. A black car idled at the curb, and beside it, Logan was speaking to an older woman Emily knew too well, her mother. Emily's heart leapt into her throat. Her mother, frail and leaning on her cane, rarely left their modest neighborhood. What was she doing here? And why was Logan standing beside her, one hand awkwardly holding a bag of groceries, his wheelchair angled on the pavement? "Mom!" Emily called, hurrying forward. Her mother turned, smiling weakly. "Your husband insisted on driving me home from the clinic. He wouldn't take no for an answer." Emily's gaze snapped to Logan. His face was unreadable, guarded as always, but there was something different in his eyes, something almost gentle. "I had business nearby," Logan muttered, as if he owed her no explanation. "Your mother looked like she needed help carrying her things." Emily's throat tightened. She wanted to snap at him, to accuse him of putting on a show to ease his guilty conscience after the fight. But the way her mother's face lit up, clearly charmed by Logan's insistence, stopped her. So Emily swallowed her words and helped guide her mother inside. That evening, after settling her mother in the guest room, Emily found Logan in his study. He was hunched over his desk, papers scattered before him, though she doubted he was actually reading them. His jaw tightened when he sensed her at the doorway. "You didn't have to do that," Emily said softly. His eyes flickered up to hers, sharp. "Do what?" "Bring my mother here. Drive her yourself. Buy her groceries." She crossed her arms, fighting to keep her tone steady. "You went out of your way." He leaned back in his chair. "It was nothing." "It wasn't nothing," she pressed. "You don't even like leaving the house." Logan's lips curved in a bitter half-smile. "And you think I'm so fragile I can't manage a simple errand?" Emily sighed. "That's not what I meant." She stepped closer, her voice softening despite herself. "I meant, thank you for caring." For a moment, their eyes locked. The tension between them wasn't sharp now. It was heavy, lingering, pulling. Logan's fingers drummed on the desk, restless, as though he didn't know what to do with the gratitude in her tone. "You read too much into things," he muttered finally, breaking the moment. Emily bit back a reply. She left before the ache in her chest turned into words she'd regret. Days passed, and though neither of them apologized for the fight, something between them shifted. Logan, once shut away in his study, began appearing in unexpected places. Emily would find him in the garden some mornings, directing the gardener on how to trim the roses, his chair rolling slowly along the path. Or she'd see him at the kitchen counter, awkwardly helping himself to coffee instead of waiting for the housekeeper. Each time, their eyes would meet briefly, neither speaking of the unspoken truce forming between them. For Emily, it was confusing. He was still arrogant, still prickly, still capable of cutting her with a single remark. But then there were these glimpses, small cracks in his armor, like when she overheard him on the phone, arranging for her younger brother's school fees to be paid, or when he left a book on her bedside table, one she had mentioned wanting weeks ago. None of it made sense. None of it fit the cold, unfeeling man she thought she had married. And yet, it was those cracks of light that kept her awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if there was more to Logan Kane than she had ever dared to believe. One evening, rain hammered against the windows as Emily sat curled on the living room couch, a blanket draped over her shoulders. She had been reading when the storm grew too loud, reminding her of childhood nights when thunder made her hide under the covers. A sudden clap made her jump, her book slipping to the floor. She bent to pick it up, only to hear Logan's voice from the doorway. "You look like a child hiding from ghosts." She glanced up, startled. He was wheeling into the room, a faint smirk on his lips, but his tone lacked its usual bite. "Storms used to scare me," she admitted, pulling the blanket tighter. "I guess old habits don't die easily." Logan settled across from her, his gaze steady. "Funny, I always found storms honest. They don't hide what they are. They roar, they rage, they pass." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the poetry in his words. "That's surprisingly thoughtful." He shrugged, almost embarrassed. "Don't tell anyone." For the first time in weeks, Emily laughed. A real laugh, soft but unguarded. Logan's lips twitched, as if fighting a smile of his own. The storm raged outside, but inside the room, the air felt warmer than it had in a long time. The cracks of light were small, fragile, and fleeting, but they were there, in the unexpected kindness, in the brief moments of laughter, in the way silence between them no longer always felt suffocating. Neither Emily nor Logan would admit it yet, but something was changing, something they couldn't ignore forever. The night was alive with the sound of cicadas, and the estate's sprawling gardens glowed under the soft wash of moonlight. Emily sat at the fountain, her fingers brushing over the rippling water, her chest heavy. She couldn't stay away from Logan, and yet every step closer to him felt like walking into fire. Logan wheeled himself out silently, his face as unreadable as ever, but his eyes found her. Always her. Couldn't sleep. His voice was quiet, but sharp, like glass catching the light. Emily turned, startled. "Neither could you, apparently." A pause. The night hummed between them. Logan studied her, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair. He looked tired, haunted, Even, for once, the armor of arrogance didn't fit. "I need to know something, Emily," Logan said finally. "Why did you agree to this marriage? Don't give me the polite answers or the ones you think I want to hear. Tell me the truth." Emily froze. Her heart pounded in her ears. She could lie. She could say it was for stability or out of kindness, or because she pitied him. But the truth pressed hard against her chest. "I thought," she swallowed hard, "I thought I could heal you." The words sliced the night open. Logan's head jerked back, his eyes flashing. "Heal me?" His laugh was harsh, bitter. "You think I'm some broken project for you to fix?" Emily's face burned. "No, that's not what I meant. Don't lie to me." Logan snapped, his voice breaking. He spun his chair away, his movements jagged, angry. "You married me because you thought you could feel good about yourself, about saving the crippled millionaire." Emily's throat ached. "You're wrong. I stayed because somewhere along the line, I fell in love with you, Logan. And I don't know how to stop." Silence. The kind that makes the world tilt. Logan's hands froze on the wheels of his chair. Slowly, he turned to her, his expression raw, unguarded. "You don't know what you're saying." His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "You don't understand what it means to love someone like me." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Then teach me." Logan's chest rose and fell, his breath uneven. For the first time since she met him, Emily saw the man beneath the arrogance. The man scarred not just in body, but in spirit. He wheeled closer, stopping just inches from her. His hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed against her cheek. The touch was trembling, uncertain, as though he feared she would disappear. "I've spent years building walls so no one would see how much it hurts," he whispered. "And you're tearing them down, Emily, piece by piece. I don't know whether to thank you or hate you for it." Emily leaned into his touch, tears sliding down her face. "Don't hate me, just let me in." Their eyes locked. The air between them thickened with everything unsaid, everything forbidden. Slowly, Logan's lips found hers. Hesitant at first, then desperate, hungry, like a man drowning who had finally found air. The kiss broke every boundary, every lie. For once, Logan wasn't the cold, untouchable millionaire. He was just a man in love, terrified of losing it. When they pulled apart, his forehead rested against hers. His voice was hoarse, shaking. "I don't know if I can give you the life you deserve, Emily, but I swear, I can give you my heart." Emily smiled through her tears, her fingers threading with his. "That's all I ever wanted." Just as they surrender to each other, Logan's lawyer arrives with a devastating revelation. The contract marriage has been leaked to the media. The world now knows their secret. Their fragile love is about to be tested in the most brutal way possible. If you thought love finally healed the wounds, think again. Would you fight the world for a love that everyone else calls a lie? Like, share, and subscribe to MG's Love Stories, because the storm is only just beginning. Emily couldn't shake off the whirlwind of emotions from the gala night. Logan's public defense of her had been startling. It was the first time he'd stood against the whispers instead of using silence as his shield. The memory of his hand gripping hers, strong and protective, replayed in her mind until sleep claimed her. But morning didn't bring peace. The sunlight spilled into the Carter mansion, soft and golden, highlighting the tension between them. Logan sat at the breakfast table, his wheelchair positioned at its head like a throne. He was reading the financial news on his tablet, jaw tight, expression unreadable. Emily hesitated in the doorway, coffee cup in her hand, trying to summon courage. She had questions, ones that had been simmering ever since their first deal. Questions about why he hid behind arrogance, why he pushed everyone away. "You're staring," Logan said, without looking up. His voice was cold, sharp. "I wasn't," Emily replied, though her cheeks warmed. "Yes, you were. If you have something to say, say it." She set the coffee down and crossed her arms. "Why me, Logan? Why marry me, of all people? You had 100 other choices. Women from your world, polished and perfect." Logan's hand stilled on the tablet. Slowly, his eyes lifted to hers, guarded but intense. Because you weren't like them. Because you didn't look at me with pity. Emily's breath caught. She hadn't expected honesty, not like this. And now, she whispered. Now, he said, voice low and dangerous. You're in too deep to walk away, and so am I. The confession startled her. His first admission of vulnerability. But before she could reply, Logan wheeled away, leaving the tablet behind. On the screen, a headline blared. Carter Enterprises on the verge of collapse? Insider sabotage suspected. Emily's heart dropped. She picked up the tablet, skimming through the article. It wasn't just gossip. It was an attack. Someone from within was leaking information to the press, trying to destroy him. Later that afternoon, Logan's oldest friend and business partner, Daniel Ross, arrived at the mansion. He was tall, sharp-suited, and had the easy charm Logan lacked. Too easy, Emily thought, watching them greet each other in the study. Logan, you're slipping, Daniel said bluntly. The board is restless. If you don't fix this leak, Carter Enterprises will burn. And dragging around a distraction like her won't help your reputation. Emily flinched, but before she could react, Logan's voice cut through like steel. Watch your mouth, Daniel. Daniel raised a brow, smirking. What? You think she can handle this life? She's nothing like us. She doesn't belong. Emily turned to leave, hurt clawing at her chest, but Logan's hand shot out, gripping the wheel of his chair. His eyes burned. She belongs with me. That's all that matters. The room went silent. Daniel's smirk faltered. Emily's heart thundered. For the first time, Logan had claimed her, not as part of a contract, not as a shield, but as his. But Daniel wasn't finished. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Then you'd better tell her everything. Because if you don't, I will. She deserves to know why you really made this deal. Emily froze. What is he talking about? Logan's jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened against the wheel. Daniel gave him a pointed look, then stormed out, leaving the words like daggers in the air. Emily stepped closer, her voice trembling. Logan, what secret is he talking about? Logan wheeled past her, eyes dark. Not now. She grabbed his arm, refusing to let him escape again. No, Logan, you don't get to shut me out anymore. You've kept me in the dark since day one, but I won't live like this. I need the truth. Did you marry me only to save your company? The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Logan finally turned to her, his eyes raw, filled with pain and anger. Yes, he admitted, voice hoarse. At first, yes. I married you because I needed a wife on paper, because investors were circling like vultures, and a perfect marriage was the only thing that kept them from tearing me apart. Emily's stomach twisted. She felt sick, betrayed, even though part of her had always suspected it. But then, Logan continued, his voice breaking, something changed. You changed me, and that terrifies me more than losing the company. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to hold on, but Daniel's words rang in her head. Secrets, lies. You should have told me sooner, she whispered, stepping back. Logan's face crumpled, but he didn't stop her when she turned and walked away. That night, Emily packed a small bag. She couldn't breathe inside the mansion anymore. The walls felt like a prison of half-truths and broken trust. She left quietly, slipping into the cool night air, her heart shattering with every step. Logan found her room empty an hour later. The sight of her bag gone ripped through him like a blade. He slammed his fist against the armrest of his chair, fury and grief colliding. For the first time in years, Logan Carter felt powerless. Not because of his legs, not because of the board's betrayal, but because the one woman who had made him feel alive was gone. Meanwhile, Emily checked into a small hotel downtown, away from the mansion, away from Logan. But peace didn't come. Her phone buzzed with news alerts. The company scandal was worsening, and Logan was being painted as unstable, unfit to lead. Emily lay awake, torn apart. She hated him for lying. She hated herself for loving him anyway. By dawn, she knew one thing. Whether she stayed or walked away forever, Act 10 would be the end of everything. The Carter estate glowed under the soft golden light of dusk. A gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming roses, mingling with the warmth of freshly lit lanterns strung across the courtyard. Tonight was not another business gala or empty celebration. Tonight was a promise. Emily stood in front of the full-length mirror, smoothing down the soft cream fabric of her gown. It wasn't a wedding dress, not like the first rushed ceremony where she became Mrs. Carter by contract. No, this one was different. This was a choice, a vow born not out of desperation but of love. Her hands trembled as she adjusted her necklace, her mind flickering back to how far they had come. From a cold contract to stolen glances, from fiery arguments to vulnerable confessions. Logan Carter had gone from a stranger behind a steel wall of arrogance to the man who had become her safe place. Emily, Logan's voice, warm and steadier than she remembered it ever being, came from behind the door. Her lips curved into a smile. "You're not supposed to be here yet. I know." His tone was lighter now, touched with the kind of boyish charm she had never thought possible from him. "But patience was never my virtue, and tonight, I don't want to wait." Emily opened the door, and there he was, Logan Carter. No tuxedo, no armor of a cold billionaire. Just Logan in a simple black shirt. His wheelchair polished but unimportant in the face of the way his eyes drank her in. For once, he didn't try to mask the love brimming in his gaze. "You look," he trailed off, shaking his head. "There aren't words." She laughed softly, touching his cheek. "You're supposed to save that for the vows. Then I'll say it twice." He smirked, but his hand covered hers, holding it against his face like it anchored him to reality. The garden filled with their closest friends, the staff who had become family, and the board members who once doubted them but now couldn't deny the truth of their bond. Lanterns swayed gently in the wind as Emily walked toward Logan, every step echoing like the final piece of a journey they had fought to protect. When she reached him, Logan took her hands in his voice carrying not just to her but to everyone gathered. "I once thought love was a weakness. I thought keeping people away kept me strong. But then you, Emily, barged into my life with your stubborn smile and your impossible kindness. And I realized strength is letting yourself be known. I never thought I deserved love. Until you. I vow to be your partner, your equal, and the man who never stops choosing you, even on the days I don't deserve you." Emily's eyes shimmered with tears. She drew in a breath, steady but breaking with emotion. "I once thought you were the last man I'd ever want to marry." Laughter rippled through the crowd, easing the weight. "But now, you're the only man I can imagine a life with. Logan, you're cold, stubborn, and infuriating. But you're also brave, brilliant, and so full of love you don't even realize it. You taught me that love doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be real. I vow to stand beside you, in the light and in the shadows, as long as we both shall live." Logan's eyes glistened, something Emily had only seen once before, on the night he first told her about his accident. He leaned forward, touching his forehead to hers, the crowd erupting as the officiant declared them husband and wife. Not by contract this time, but by choice. The night blossomed with laughter and music. Logan and Emily danced, not in the traditional sense, but in their own way. He held her close in his chair, their movement small but their joy enormous, as guests clapped along. For the first time in years, Logan didn't feel like the disabled billionaire. He felt like a man who had fought for his happiness and won. Even his board members, once critical of Emily, raised their glasses. Marcus, his loyal lawyer, leaned over to Emily at one point and whispered, "You've done more for him than any doctor or deal ever could." Emily only smiled, because she knew it wasn't just about saving Logan. He had saved her, too. Hours later, when the guests had dwindled and the lanterns burned low, Emily and Logan sat side by side overlooking the gardens. The stars stretched endlessly above them. "You know," Logan murmured, his hand tightening around hers, "when I signed that contract, I thought I was buying time, protection, control." Emily tilted her head toward him, her smile tender. "And what did you get instead? His gaze softened. Everything I didn't know I needed. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness but from the weight of a love so real it felt eternal. She leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. "No more contracts," she whispered. "Never again," he promised, kissing the top of her head. "Just us, always." And for the first time since his accident, since the darkness that had nearly swallowed him whole, Logan Carter felt whole again. Not because he was healed physically, but because Emily had healed the part of him no one else could reach. From a cold contract to forever love, Emily and Logan's story shows us that sometimes the greatest risks bring the greatest rewards. What did you feel most deeply about their journey? Was it the tension, the vulnerability, or the vows? Tell us in the comments. If this story held your heart, don't just leave quietly. Like this story, share it with someone who believes in love, and subscribe to MG's Love Stories, where passion burns, hearts heal, and stories never end.